Hello, everyone. My name is Alisé A Préjéan of KnowThyselfAndHeal.com, and I am here with Kameliya Simeonova, and we're going to be talking about the full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio that's happening on May 5th at 1:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest or on the West Coast like we are, then that's going to be 10:34 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, May 5th, 2023. So before we get started, I just want to say that both Kamelia and I both do astrology readings. And so if you find yourself inclined to reach out, you're certainly welcome to reach out to either of us to do a personal natal reading. And you can also find our services on our websites. And as I said, my website is knowthyselfandheal.com. And Kamelia, what is your website?
talesoftheheart.net.
Okay, great. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen. And so we're going to look at the chart. And the chart that we're using is actually found on cafeastrology.com. And so if you don't already know, Cafe Astrology is a really wonderful website to find charts for different events. So the new moons, full moons, and there's a lot of information on Cafe Astrology. And so I love going onto their site and just being able to look at the chart really quickly. And so I just want to be sure that I am speaking to their website and letting you know that that's where we found this chart, and you can find it as well at cafeastrology.com. So here's the full moon eclipse chart. And as we know, with all full moons, this means that the moon is opposing the sun. And this opposition happens at, as I said, every full moon. And in this particular full moon, we've got moon in Scorpio at 14 degrees, almost 15 degrees, because it's 14 degrees and 58 minutes. So 2 minutes, and then it would be 15 degrees, right? So, and then this means that the sun is at 14 degrees, 58 minutes of Taurus. And so this is an interesting, particularly interesting full moon lunar eclipse for a lot of reasons. I find to be one of the most interesting is, for me anyway, is that it's so close to this aspect with Uranus. The moon is actually full, and then it will move pretty quickly. The moon does move pretty quickly. It takes about 2.5 days to move through a sign, but it will move pretty quickly and then oppose Uranus right after the exact lunation or full moon. And so Uranus is quite interesting too, because this is a south node eclipse, and Uranus is the ruler of where Pluto is in Aquarius. So it's bringing an interesting piece of information, I think, in maybe individually and collectively in this eclipse portal. And so that's pretty interesting. Uranus is a planetary energy that can bring in the unexpected. It has to do with the nervous system and information, right? And so this could, being that Uranus is in Taurus, and Taurus is the first earth sign, it has to do with our body and our senses. I think that, it does bring in some implications around maybe how our nervous system is doing, what information we may be getting from our nervous system based on, any information we're getting in this eclipse portal, because Mercury is retrograde. And it actually, as we're doing this video, by the way, we're recording this on May 1st. And so that's of course of 2023, right? So Mercury today at about 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time was Cazimi the sun. And what that means is the sun and Mercury are uh, at the exact same degree of the sky, right? We're sign. And that happened at 11 degrees and 19 minutes of Taurus. And it does bring in a new cycle with the sun, right? Mercury and the sun. And from what I was reading about this particular Kazemi, it has to do with initiating something new. And there's different, whenever Mercury comes into Kazemi with the sun, there are different cycles by which that conjunction can happen. So there's different ways in which it actually initiates new things on a mercurial level. And what is Mercury? But it's also has to do with the nervous system. It has to do with moving information, distributing information. And so anything that has to do, we know Mercury is the planetary ruler of Gemini and also the planetary ruler of Virgo. And so it has to do with information and also sorting out things, sorting out information, and actually, it has to do with commerce. It also has to do with just anything that has to do with how we share information, right? And so Mercury and Uranus have an interesting relationship, I think, because they're both related to the nervous system and the distribution of information throughout the body, for example. And so we know that the nodes of the moon are in Taurus and Scorpio and have been since January of 2021. So this is interesting because I think because we're coming into culmination of the Taurus Scorpio nodes, because the nodes will shift in July of 2023 into Aries and Libra. And so I think it's interesting that we're experiencing the Mercury Kazemi, the sun, on the day also that Pluto goes retrograde. And Pluto is the planetary ruler of the South Node, and this is a South Node eclipse. So there's a lot going on, a lot going on. So I've just actually shared a lot of information, and I want to ask you, Kamelia, do you have anything to say about that? And always feel free to interrupt or, oh, hey, what about this? Because I could just start going, as you know, we do. You start looking at the chart and you're like, and there's this and there's that and there's this, so always feel free to stop me if I go on a roll, and so that we can make sure that, we're catching all the points of all the information that we see.
So it was important that Alisé mentioned that it was a series of eclipses that have happened. Not only the nodes have been going on through that axis, Taurus, Scorpio, but also we had a series of eclipses last year, 2022, in Taurus, Scorpio. And so we have this last one this year, actually on May 5th, that is again Taurus, Scorpio. And it happens to be in the very mid degrees of those. So obviously, on a collective level and also a personal one, we have had an opportunity to be engaged viscerally. We're talking about the fixed signs, and we're talking about Taurus body, and then we talk not only body, but and body, and also we talk about Scorpio. You can't go deeper than that on a psychological level and soul level. And those have been exploring certain themes in the axis. So we can reflect back and see what are the themes that have come up in terms of what we considered our own value, our own needs. What is that how can we sustain ourselves, our sustainability, How can we own our own space? How can we own our ability to be independent? And how we cannot do that, and what are the sources of that we have clinged into in order to sustain that sustainability of ours, or sustain some sense of value, or sustain some sense of power or security when we're talking about Taurus. So that exploration has been going on again in our own lives and our on a collective level, and we can see where those particular signs fall in our charts / lives to see what exactly has happened over the last year that has revealed certain specifics. And so we have to actually, of course, understand that axis better in order to figure out what is ending right now. And because the middle degree of any sign is extreme, that's the fixity of the sign. That's a point where the sign is the sign lessons, or the sign themes are really in our face. We can say that the 29 degree is one of those, but it's almost like the 29 degree will be getting a bigger picture or something like this. But with the 15 degree, 14 degree, 16 degree, we are really stationed into that. So there's no way we can miss it, whatever is coming to us. It's interesting that we have in this eclipse Moon on one side and all these planets supporting the Taurian part. So, and the other thing that we know about full moon is that, well, astrologers are saying that we're talking about a release, about a completion of something. But what is that, and how is it completion? It's helpful, I think, to think about the full moon. It's an opposition, right? Because the moon and the sun are opposite each other, exactly opposite each other, right? But to understand why we're talking about relationship dynamic and this is, imagine that, that's just for the sake of playing. When we have two planets in conjunction, we have two people, for example, stating one place, and they're together, they're just looking at one direction and they're ready to go, or so there's this impulse of two energies to go, or to stay, or to do something together. Imagine that one person stays on that place and then the other one goes around in a circle, and then eventually it's across, right across us. So if we have two people at one place and they're going one direction, they're going one direction, there is no stopping. So there is the potency of this urge, and you go, and you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, but the idea is that to go, and the combination of this energy, and you go. But then when the other person is on the other side, we are vividly and viscerally aware that this person is there. So we get to see that person really well. And once we get to see that person really, it could be a subject, not necessarily a person, but then we become aware of their features. We become aware of, and you can't necessarily go because they come this way. So this is a situation in which there is this relationship. We cannot deny that there is somebody right in front of us. And so what happens in that moment is we see the person completely. They're not 30 degrees away from us. They're not like 90 degrees away from us where we can only see one side of them. We see the entirety of the person. And so then naturally we can start thinking of, oh, I like certain features, or I don't like certain features. And we try to go this way, and then the other person comes this way. And then eventually we are viscerally aware of, again, that interaction. So what we know about interactions is that we always project certain ideas, or certain, especially the stuff that we're not aware of, onto the other person, or onto the environment. Let's just put it this way, onto the environment. And so this is where we get aware of what we like and what we don't like in the others. And then but that also gives us an opportunity to figure out certain features of ourselves that we don't necessarily, we're not aware of. So in that point where we have this opposition, we can converse, we can get a bigger picture of what it is in the other person that we like, what is it that we don't like, why we don't like it. We can decide to fight, we can decide to have a conversation. But in any case, when this is happening, we get more information. And that information is not only about a subject, it's information about ourselves. And so I was just thinking in that way, in terms of completion or a release or understanding something much better. And we understand it because of that opposition. Now we can see, we can reflect fully. And so what we're called to reflect here about is, again, the themes around my own value, what constitutes my own value, what are my resources that I can feel totally secure in. And I know that those are my resources. I own them, so nobody can take them away from me. And I can, this is what I value. And so I'm not easily able to give it away because it constitutes part of who I am. As opposed to, and also from that place, if I'm fully into owning who I am, well, of course, first we have to know who we are, right? But once I do that, and once I'm absolutely accountable for my resources, I know that wherever I go, I can produce those resources, and I don't need to count on other people or other entities. Then I can easily, or let's say more easily, share those resources with others, or I can allow someone to come closer to me without being afraid that they may take from me and I would never be able to replace. And I can sustain to be vulnerable about sharing myself with somebody, and I can go to a deeper level to do that. But if my identity, meaning my value system, is not too clear, if I'm hanging on to something else in order to give me that sense of sustainability and security, then I will be very careful in how I share myself with others, how sincere I will be, how much I can allow them to come closer. Something about the vulnerability issues there too. So I think I'm going to end here, and then we'll see what comes, and then we'll continue.
Yeah, what you're saying is definitely sparking a lot of inspirations and insights around this chart, because as you were talking about the moon opposing the sun, being in opposition, oppositions are always going to be like a Libra component, where it's through the reflections from the outside world that we get to know something about ourselves that we may have gone unnoticed, or
Mhm.
not as visually seen, or as vividly
Mhm.
seen is the best word, vividly seen. And this is what's so wonderful about the full moons and about relationship in general, is that it's through the opportunity of relating that we actually get to know ourselves more deeply. And so through the reflections, and with the Taurus Scorpio axes, this is always going to be about uh, our own personal values and value as well, through our own senses. You know, Taurus being the senses and the body. And, as I was talking about this Mercury, Kazimi, the sun, Pluto going retrograde on May 1st. And then, we experienced this eclipse on May 5th, where Uranus is very close to the sun, and then the moon is very close to opposing Uranus. And so whatever information we may be getting is potentially, from others or circumstances, situations, or circumstances in the outside world that are reflecting back to us our own sense of values and value. And one of the things that I found interesting about what you're saying that was coming to my mind was that Pluto, being that it just went retrograde in Aquarius, where it's going to actually re-enter Capricorn on June 12th of 2023. This is interesting because this has to do with really being completely responsible for our own structure of consciousness and our own reality, our own personal reality, because Capricorn is a yin sign. So this is about how we actually construct our own personal reality from within. And Aries and Libra being the other cardinal signs to Cancer and Capricorn, and they form the cardinal grand cross, right, in our own psychological development, in the psyche, in the sky. This is interesting because everything in our own personal reality really is a projection from our own consciousness. Mars, Aries, Mars rules Scorpio, and Mars acts on behalf of Pluto. What is unconscious, what has become automatic default, what we've acted on and what we see as the past, what we're used to acting on, which has now become just a automatic pilot. And this is where we can project onto others and to the environment, like you were saying, where it's just automatic. And so we have these things that we project onto the environment, even things that we then become, we actually can project these things that we're used to seeing, and even if it's not actually happening in the current moment. So we can project or superimpose a reality onto the reality of what is current and not even really be able to see what's going on. And this is where that relating, like you're saying, having the relationship, being able to actually relate with others and recognize what is it I like, what is it I don't like, relationships or people that I've bonded with or been intimate with, which is a Scorpio theme, as well as Taurus, because we share our resources through that Taurus Scorpio axis with intimate bonds, and where people have earned our trust or maybe betrayed our trust. We could be finding either way, having experiences of people that are earning our trust or betraying our trust. And so what we do with those experiences as well, and how we act on our own behalf, is going to be part of that, being that Mars is a co-ruler of this eclipse in Scorpio. And one of the really important points that came to my mind is just that because Pluto has just gone retrograde, the other planetary ruler of this eclipse, it's going to go back into Capricorn. Really, as much as we've been able to be really, really owning the responsibility of our own projections and our own structure of consciousness, our own reality, is how much we're actually going to be able to really harness not only our own empowerment and power, but also our own value. Because when we really become responsible with that, we are co-creating our reality, then we can recognize how valuable we really are. We can recognize our own gifts and our own resources, and where it is that we are able to regenerate those resources with others, and where it is that it is not a regenerating of resources with others, right? And this is where Taurus and Scorpio can be the axes of consciousness and experience, where either we're regenerating energy or we're depleting energy. We're actually we're making good investments with our energy and our personal resources and the value of who we are and what we have to share, the power that we have to share from our own soul. and also where it is that we could be having others take from us, where if we're in that dynamic, then if we are not applying the boundaries, which is a Saturnian theme related to Capricorn and Aquarius, really, because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius, then we could be getting the information that we need to reevaluate the structure of consciousness by which we are working with, how maybe that has to do with conditionings that we still want to be diligently working with internally, because Pluto will go back into Capricorn, which is going to again expose, are there areas we need to clean up our parameters by which we're actually creating our reality from the internal level, from the inside out. And so that to me really makes a lot of sense with the Mercury Cazimi and Pluto going retrograde on the same day. And then also with this Uranian component of the eclipse, and how Uranus is very important in this opposition. So
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, so that was all really just inspired by everything you just said, and how we could be coming up to really valuable information around, are we really positioning ourselves to really understand our own value by actually really recognizing our responsibility to that. And
Yeah,
that it is our responsibility to actually discern, which is a Mercury, being that Mercury, rules Virgo, to discern and use discernment in what circumstances are going on in our lives, that we are responsible for that, because if things are showing up in our world, we've attracted it, which is a Venusian theme. Venus rules Taurus, and through the vibration that we actually are operating at through our Taurus energy, our Taurus consciousness, we attract things to us so that we can know ourselves more deeply, so that we can be aware of what it is we're creating from the inside out. And so that's a very, I find to be really important piece to be considering, because the nodes are going to move. And so we want to be, and we're going to be likely being given information to really quicken this process, so that we're making sure we are really owning our value and owning our resources, and making sure that the reflections are giving us the reflection that things are being structured in our lives in the way we desire.
yeah, it's what constitutes a stability in our lives, and we have the opportunity to look at this dichotomy here and see where we placed the sense of security, and what exactly we have placed our sense of powerlessness. Well, we know sometimes we want to necessarily be in a particular relationship, we want to have this money, we want to get this job because of the money. It's sifting through what is the reason why I am associated, or I'm deeply engaged, or deeply committed, or deeply merged with that powerful source, or something that I feel like it has power over me. Whether this is, again, do I because of the money, but not because it's something natural that stems from me? Am I in a relationship because of all kinds of different, because I'm afraid to be alone, or because I all kinds of different reasons, but not the natural one, that my heart feels good to be with a person? Am I overly engaged with my kids to the point where I'm forgetting who I am, and I feel like my kids are constantly asking stuff from me, and I am just giving, and I don't sustain my sense of again, stability and well-being and thriving, because I know in my mind that I have to give out everything to my kids. Or in terms of relationship, of course, we're looking at where this moon falls in the chart, in every one of us's charts, and where I have accepted that I'm somebody that I'm not because I had to be that way. I've been overpowered in terms of having to be that way, or my personality has been manipulated to be in a certain way. But then I see through a reflection in my relationships that something is off. I'm either attracting people that I'm not really relating to, or I'm attracting people that are actually constantly asking from me. So there you go. This is the mirror, and it just gives you through the reflection on the other side that something in terms of my value is not reflected out there. And so we can see where Taurus falls in the chart, and we can see where, of course, Scorpio falls in the chart, and then see how this is going to be mirrored, where exactly that's going to be that conversation going. And because the idea is that we cannot, I mean, we can reach out to, and it's normal. What's empowering for us is everything that makes us ultimately feels free to express ourselves. And of course, if I want to really travel, I will need money, and I may stay at home and be dependent on my parents because that's where the money comes from. But then there is certain conditions that I have to follow that are actually not me, they're against my values. So I have to compromise my values in order to get something, in a scorpionic way, which definitely puts us in a position of manipulation on both sides. So examining also that part is also important, because ultimately when the Taurian, we have all these planets, and then the North Node is in Taurus. If the North Node was in Scorpio, we could have probably looked at the scorpionic theme in a different way. But we have all these call turned towards the Taurus. So we have the North Node in Taurus, we have the Mercury going retrograde in Taurus, and we have the Sun, as you said, Mercury cazimi to the Sun, and also the Uranus. So the call, and maybe in many cases, whatever happens in our lives during this time, in terms of outside circumstances that are calling for this reflection to happen, would be it may be something unexpected that is happening in terms of our resources, whatever resources is. For many people, resources are the kids. For many people, resources is their own talents, but for some people are just the money part, or the money that they're dependent on the social system or something else. So there will be that shakeup or aha moment. Well, of course, we know that we live our charts / lives in many different levels of psychological awareness. If I'm not aware and I don't have the ability, or not ability that much, but the habit of doing the reflection onto myself, of course, the call and that awakening about certain things of how I navigate those two parts of the axis of Taurus Scorpio will happen through something that happens in the outside world. But we may as well have a great conversation with a friend, and that could show up as a very aha moment in terms of where do we hold, what happened to the value, what happened to our perception of our own value, what was really influencing that perception. So the uranium portion that is close to the sun, and also balsamic conjunction to the sun, and also to Mercury, is those aha moments in terms of, again, it depends of how deeply we are engaged with our own reflective process, and healing process, or understanding process, or committed to gaining more awareness. But if we're open to that conjunction in a Taurian side will bring amazing information that will be on a almost like visceral level. It's not something that we need to check on internet if it's true or not. This is going to be so so deep and so coming from our own heart, and from our own body. So that is something that we can actually look forward to through the next couple of months. Not that it's not happening right now, but it's something that is there, and it's there because we do need to, again, shake off all these other resources or places or people that we have dependency on for the purposes of sustainability or feeling the sense of power, because we feel powerless. And the thing is that the actual power, or maybe power is not the right word, but the feeling of fullness and enoughness it comes from the soul and from the authenticity and from our own value system that is not influenced by somebody else. And we don't have to acquiesce, or we don't have to change ourselves in order to be, we don't have to change ourselves in order to have. Because ultimately what we need is within ourselves. The problem is whether we've been given the opportunity or we haven't perceived that we've been given the opportunity to develop that. And we know very well how, let's say, in groups environments, sometimes to belong to the group, which is a natural need that the humans have to belong, we get to give out pieces of ourselves because, let's say, this piece is not really valuable by the group. So I don't like the way you think. We don't think that way in this group, so maybe you should curb it. So you curb it, and then that continues. And then those pieces are things that you are part of you in a Taurian way, but you had to give out, or you have to cut from yourself in order to have the power that you feel from belonging to the group. So here is another reflection of the Taurian part, but then without understanding, because it happens sometimes slowly and gradually, sometimes we because of security reasons, right? Then we don't pay attention to what has happened here. And then we can't, again, the call coming from the north nodes moving into north node in Aries and south node in Libra will be to express identity. We cannot express identity if we don't have a solid ground from which to express identity. And so that solid ground cannot be, well, I have to not say certain things because otherwise I'm not. And the problem with doing this is that we're doing it not only, in group settings, not only in partnership settings, not only with our significant others or job or whatever, or family. When we do that, it happens without we figuring out that this is happening. So usually what happens is something comes up and awakens us to the fact that that's not me, that's not part of my value. Why am I here? And that becomes a crisis. And of course it can become a crisis considering that Uranus is part of the whole signature, but it also can become a very deep aha moment, insight, catharsis, or awakening, or call for that individuation. Okay, I'm going to withdraw all this ties that I have, that I don't need to. I'm gonna recover the pieces of myself that constitute my own, and own them, own all of them. And if that means they have to cut ties, that's okay. I'll cut ties. And so Mercury retrograde is helping in this review process.
Mhm.
Is this part of my value system? It's not part of my value system. And it's almost happening on a visceral level. I mean, people can feel like, oh, I really need to throw up stuff out of my house because that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. Why do I have this in my wardrobe? But it will happen depending on, of course, where the signature falls into the chart.
Yeah, what house it's in. So,
Yeah.
whatever houses that anybody watching this video, whatever house that you have Taurus and Scorpio in, those are the areas of life that this would be happening, uh, that you'd be noticing this process happening. One of the things you're talking about is really interesting, um, for me, is the Uranus component. So Uranus conjunct the sun and of course opposing the moon, right? So or I should say technically it's the moon opposing Uranus. This is important because recognizing that the sun naturally is the ruler for Leo and Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. And
Mhm.
Uranus, and by the way, so you're this kind of brings in that Leonian Aquarian axis of consciousness, which is about how we self-actualize our own uh, creativity. So it's creative self-actualization. I like to call it our own personal contribution of light in the world, right? And that's what it is. I mean, how is it that we're going to self-actualize our own value? Uh, and what is going to be valuable to whatever group we find ourselves in, or it could be community, family. And so it's an individual process. And that's what Aquarius is about. It's about individuation. And it is about, really not making compromises to our own uniqueness, because our own uniqueness is our brilliance. And so if we find ourselves in groups where we cannot be who we really are, and where we have to compartmentalize and we have to fragment who we are to accommodate the group or others, this is where we can actually cause fragmentation in consciousness, where we can cause disassociation, where we actually detach part of our value and valuable resources that we have to share that naturally is us. It is who we are. It is literally coming from our own soul. And it is unique and brilliant and different than anyone else. And so this is what we are here to bring, really. I mean, this is what the fixed grand cross actually is showing in our own psyche. It is about really who we really are at a soul level, and how that power that we have, the value that's within that, is actually meant to be brought out uh, into whatever group we find ourselves in, or out for humanity, which is an Aquarian theme. And it's a very unique, brilliant contribution of light. And so when you have the sun conjunct Uranus, it's opposing the moon in Scorpio. It's like, well, like you were saying, Kamelia, it's like, where is it that we may actually fracture parts of our own development in our own psyche because it's not accepted in this group, or maybe it's accepted in this group but not in that group, or this friendship and not in that friendship. So this is, you know this can be an opportunity for eliminating the things, people, situations, circumstances, whatever it is, however it's showing up, that is actually asking us to fragment who we are, to actually disassociate and compartmentalize our
Mhm.
identity. And so the call here is that when we do make the effort, Mars and Cancer, to take care of ourselves and our own emotional needs to be who we are, this is where we can actually reintegrate our identity and our authenticity in our value. And because Uranus can be in your own natal chart, as well as how it's where it's transiting, where we're experiencing reintegration. But if we're not experiencing reintegration, then we may actually be experiencing fragmentation. And we know that fragmentation and disassociation or detachment from our authentic nature actually does cause mental instability. And it is obviously traumatic. It's traumatic to the ego and traumatic to the psyche. And so we will have to go through a healing process eventually to recover those parts of ourselves. As you were talking about, Kamelia, about, really actually gathering, I mean, we can call that soul retrieval, where we're having to gather these parts of ourselves that we learned to actually detach from because they were not accepted by a group or a friend or some kind of a connection, maybe a community. And so this is an important piece with this, is the opportunity to actually quicken this process of our valuing ourselves so that we can actually bring in our unique brilliance into the world. And so with that Pluto being retrograde too, and the fact that it's going to be moving back into Capricorn, can again be doing the deconditioning necessary in order to restructure internally what it is that needs to be restructured, and restructure in our own lives what needs to be restructured. And when I say internally too, this is important because Mars is in Cancer, Capricorn's opposite sign. And so this is really about taking care of our own needs and really sensing them emotionally, recognizing, are we feeling safe to be who we are and act on our own behalf and our own needs? And in that restructuring, if there is a need for restructuring to self-actualize our wholeness and our who we are. And this is going to be important because once Pluto moves into Aquarius for good, then this is going to be all about the Yang principle of how we structure our reality. So we want to get really clear about taking responsibility for ourselves, because at the end of the day, we're responsible for ourselves. And we may have at times, let's just say, maybe in our upbringing, in our childhood, or in relationships in some way or another, where we were taught or we felt that we needed to fragment ourselves or not be who we really are, or didn't even know who we really are because we were told we should be a certain way, or whatever, however that could have shown up for us, maybe to fit into some societal norm, whatever it is, that ultimately there is opportunity there. Because the thing is at the end of the day, we're always responsible for ourselves. Even in childhood, if we were in a situation where we're not able to be ourselves, the beautiful thing about that is that we know that just by our vibration, just by what we actually bring to us on a soul level, which is Pluto and Venus, this magnetism that we all have, we magnetize situations, circumstances, people, things in our life that are going to help us to grow. And so if there were things where we were not, or situations, I should say, or people, relationships, where we were not able, or we were taught to not be who we are, or to fragment parts of ourselves, then ultimately the beauty of it is so that we can recover who we are, so that we can remember who we are and reintegrate who we are in a stronger way, and really go through that experience of being willing to let go of anything and everything that does not allow us for our own natural blossoming of our natural unique design that's really naturally encoded in our psyche. And so I even today was having this experience where I was remembering things from my childhood, and I came to this sense of, really owning some of the places that I felt like I was challenged in my own childhood. And
Mm,
really, I felt this forgiveness for the people that brought me circumstances in my life that I felt like I couldn't be who I was, or I didn't, that actually contributed to having to reclaim my power in some way throughout my life. And so I really realized that, like, I mean, I've had this realization before, but it just came to me again today in a new way, where I just was like, those people were just doing the best that they knew how to do also. And so there was this level of, and yet, it doesn't mean that they have to be in my life now,
yeah, yeah.
but that I actually drew them in so that I could recover what I needed to recover, or to go through the experience of reclaiming my own empowerment and my own identity. And so I think that that is like, again, this opportunity of recognizing at the end of the day, no matter what, even in my childhood, I'm ultimately responsible for my reality. And
Mm.
when we really come into that understanding, we really realize that we can be uh, in gratitude for everything that we've experienced, that is actually bringing us to the place of remembering and reclaiming who we are and our own unique gifts and our own unique value. So that piece is it's interesting that I was experiencing that naturally, and that was before the Kazemi happened today on May 1st. And so I think that's an important piece in regards to the self responsibility, really, owning our own value and reclaiming our own value, and the reintegration that can happen with that Uranus conjunct the sun. And it's going to be a pretty big theme, I think, as Pluto moves through Aquarius, is that connection with this uh, reintegration versus fragmentation and
Mhm.
compartmentalization of consciousness, right? And how, uh, you know, when we cannot be our unique selves, we actually can create mental instability in ourselves and in others. And so, it's not that we're going to agree with everyone or we're going to naturally fit with everyone, but that it's our responsibility to be selective, which is a Mars, energy, to be selective. And it's other people's responsibility to also be selective in regards to what is actually enhancing, our own heart and enhancing our own light. And then what is it that we feel like we're being diminished, in some way.
Yeah, the what also the understanding that the fragmentation happens, of course, unconsciously. It's not something that we understand that it's happening. But the more we lose pieces of ourselves, or because there's certain experiences, we actually um, dissociate those experiences. We have to people have to understand that we're talking about desensitization that happens um, when we lose parts of us, and not necessarily. I mean, those parts of us could be the ability to speak out, the ability to um, go for what I want, the ability to express one part of myself. These are all parts of us. And when this starts happening and we lose those parts and we dissociate from them, the more dissociated parts we have, the more easily influenced we are, and we are subject to manipulation. That's something that is just given. And so why is that? Because we don't know ourselves. we don't have those pieces, and those pieces contain very valuable information of what is important, what's not important. The very fact that those pieces don't are not part of ourselves means that we don't know necessarily what we want. And we can probably all of us know people that they would have, I don't remember much of my childhood, or I really have vague memories of something, and oh, if you ask them what they like, they will say, I don't know. I mean, granted, this is a characteristic that's very, attributed to the archetype of Libra, but it's not only that. I mean, it has to do with the fact that we don't own the entirety of who we are, or we are not aware of it. And so let's say we have pieces of us that are missing, or, little child was not able to get on the stage and say it's favorable song because, or sing its favorable song because parents didn't allow, or other kids were laughing and all that. So this is a valuable memory that gets deleted, but it's not only a memory, it has a physical component to it, it has a emotional component to it, it has a mental component to it. And so, okay, we have a part of us that is not able to express itself, and then you add the rest of it, it could be anything else. So then we're gonna, one part of it, just an example, could be that we will hold on to people that are very good at that, just because we're unconsciously, that's the way we're owning that part that we don't know that we have lost. But that will make us very dependent on a person that we have put on the pedestal because they're good at performing or something like that. So one reason why we're looking at those TVs and movies and whatnot, and we have those celebrities in our faces, is the same reason. We're projecting those parts of ourselves onto these people, and the industry knows that. It knows that as long as they're a piece of us they're missing, and we don't recognize that in us. We had a conversation with Alisé. Probably you want to talk about that more as to what exactly the celebrity stands for. But this is how we get prompt to manipulation of all kinds of, in any form, shape, and way, or whatever. And so from that perspective, we will feel constantly as not having enough. Taurus, that doesn't necessarily need to be in material possessions. It could be we don't have enough within ourselves. We don't feel secure within ourselves. How are we going to go ahead and express ourselves in relationships, in friendships, and feeling invaluable to have kids, or all kinds of different expressions that could have. Why? Because we don't, there is desensitization in that way. And that part of us is so deep inside our soul somewhere else that we project it unconsciously onto others, and we hold on to those others for the sake of our lives, not knowingly that we're actually looking for those parts of ourselves. And so when, and that creates I'm so sorry, I was gonna let you talk about, but just to finish, is that we project those things onto others. The more we project stuff that we're not aware within ourselves, the more dependent we become on institutions, others, for the wrong reasons. Because this is where we feel the sense of power, and we feel powerless because unconsciously we feel that pieces of us are missing. And in that way, our relationships with those institutions, with the people we depend on for resources, that's not a healthy relationship. It's usually a relationship that's based on some sort or level of manipulation, and there is no flow in the energy there in that relationship, and there is no intimacy in terms of I'm honest and I'm open. Because first of all, I don't know who I am, so I would feel always scared to open myself because I don't know who I am. But in terms of celebrities, we had a very interesting conversation because before this release, and Alisé probably wants to say more about that.
Yeah, we were just talking about celebrities and how it is a the word celebrity comes from celebratory, so what are we celebrating? And so when you look at these people that, and this could be in any genre, so it doesn't even have to be celebrities as far as movie stars or um celebrities, could be musicians, could be
Right.
um even people in our own community that are more well known, or the popular crowd in high school. I mean, it could be people that are particularly celebrated, right? And how, what we were talking about is that it is easy for those of us. So if we've actually lost aspects of our own power or our own selves, we can easily project onto those that are the celebratory, right? So it's like, let's use movie stars as a really very vivid one, where we can see people, the masses, actually, um, you know, put movie stars on pedestals. But as I said, it could be any genre. And and really, the thing is, though, is then, and this is kind of a Neptunian component actually too, because Neptune is that way as well, where we can kind of like put somebody into this ideal and put them into a role. But it can also, when that happens, this is also gives open for manipulation, and for the masses, for example, to be manipulated through this celebrity status, right? And so what we were talking about before the call here is just that um, I've seen this a lot on Instagram and different social medias, where um, these actors, actresses, or people that are in that role where they're being projected upon, that this can also be manipulated, where it really keeps this drama going on in regards to more of a lower vibrational consciousness, and thought and perceptions around relating, and um, and then it can actually keep those projections going. So where, when, and this is interesting in the sense that the nodes of the moon will move into Aries and Libra in July, and this is going to give us the opportunity, I really believe, to actually really let go of imbalances or inequalities in relating. I mean, this could even be in regards to like celebrities. And I personally think, as Pluto is moving through Aquarius, it is going to expose where media is used, or technology is used in a way to manipulate humanity, or manipulate people's ideas as well. And um you know where it actually keeps any like drama going, because Leo and Aquarius is about drama, keeping things dramatic and heightened through drama. And so um yeah, I think that one of the reasons why the masses can be manipulated is because if there are things that we're not owning about our celebrating ourselves, there's things about our own light and our own personal power that we are not owning, then we're projecting it out there. And then when we project it out there, that then can be where it is that we leak energy, we leak our own power, and we're also manipulated by by media in general. And it can keep us into kind of a mentality that keeps regenerating this uh, mental drama or instability around our own personal value and our own personal power. And so, the thing about it is that, from my understanding, all of us are natural storytellers. We are naturally, we all have Gemini in our chart, which is the storyteller, really. This capacity to communicate and to learn through storytelling. And so all of us are naturally geared to be storytellers and to actually want to hear the story, want to listen, want to learn through the element of story. And so this is why we're all attracted to story in some way. Maybe it's through songs, maybe it's through the media, maybe it's through writing, or maybe it's through different languages, different cultures. There's so many different ways in which we actually tell a story. And if you think about it, all of it, everything is just telling a story. Everything is just information at the end of the day. And so this is how we naturally express ourselves and learn, and gain consciousness as well. However, the thing is that it's a very powerful tool. This is our power, is to actually tell our story and to write our own story. But if we do not write our own story, others will write it for us, right? And so this is really important in regards to recognizing how much our consciousness can be influenced by storytellers, by media, by what is being celebrated in consciousness and what is not being celebrated in consciousness. And so that's something to be aware of, because ultimately, this celebrities and the ideals and things like that, we could be looking at, well, why is it that we see this as a celebratory situation, or a celebratory person, or a celebratory idea or ideal, right? And then is that something that actually brings more value to our lives, more value to ourselves, or is it something that diminishes it? Is it something that keeps me into the idea of inequality? Because if it keeps us in the idea of inequality, it's not real and it's not true, and it's an illusion. And so this is where we can be leaking our power and leaking into these illusions that really are not beneficial to our own lives, right? So as the nodes move into Aries and Libra, we can be, I think, seeing that. And we want to, when you think about Libra, okay, it's a quincunx from Taurus, and both of them are Venus ruled signs. And Venus, the inner side of Venus is Taurus, the outer side of Venus is Libra. And so these are interesting. The quincunx is always going to be, do I need to make an adjustment? And so if we're relating with others in a way that's imbalanced, where we're valuing someone else or valuing someone else's reflection more than our own, where there's not regenerating energy from the reflections, we can then be cued to go back into our own inner side of Venus and look at, well, where is it I'm not harnessing my own value? Where is it that I'm not seeing my own value, not actually accessing my own heart and my own value? And so we want to, in my opinion, like the way I like to look at Taurus and Libra, it's like such an important piece in how we're relating with anything and everything in the outside world, including like these celebrities or these people that we hold in high regard. They could be teachers, they could be leaders of some sort, of any group or any community or any, even just a group of friends, right? Are we relating in a way that is actually valuing ourselves equally as much as we are valuing others? Is that always, is that bringing value to our lives in the way in which we're relating or seeing the reflections? Because if we're not there's that saying that oh, there's this really beautiful saying. It's been a long time since I've actually remembered this, but there's a word that um, expresses this, where it's something like, the beauty that you see in me is yours.
Mm.
I can't remember the word. It's of a different language, but I remember just loving this word, and I wish I could remember it, but it has been a while since this has come into memory. But it's like what we see in others really is very much filtered through our own perceptions. And so we have to remember that it is really coming from our own projection and consciousness. So the versions of other people that we see are naturally filtered through our own personal way in which we're seeing that person. It's not always the totality of that person. We can only see from our own lens, right? And so everything that we are seeing in others is naturally coming from, it's our own beauty, it's our own selves, right? So this,
Yes.
taking
I'm
it
sorry.
back to the chart, is like, okay, with Uranus and the sun, you know, this can be really looking at that reintegrative process where we recognize, and the sun and Uranus, I think in some ways is always going to be about, what are we actually celebrating here?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we could really, I think it would be important to consider that as Pluto moves through Aquarius, because we're going to want to be looking at, what are we really celebrating here with
Mhm.
media, with technology, with, like, what are we valuing? What are we celebrating? And is it something that fragments my consciousness or detaches me from my value, or something that actually adds to my value,
Right. Yeah. Or I start disowning myself and owning other things that have the logo of somebody else that I was told that it's famous. That we buy stuff because they're advertised by celebrities. Um, and because of what? Because that's the best, or because of the celebrity. And in many ways, when there's those um, anchor people that are they're interviewing celebrities. Now, just to mention, we're not devaluing celebrities. We're just looking into the image of what this has turned out to be. So we know that many times, whether somebody is going to sit with Oprah or somebody else, and they will be telling stories about their cancer episode, or they'll have issues with their child, and the child has gone through severe addiction issue, and we look at it and we admire them because they went through this whole ordeal. But how is this ordeal different than what every one of us goes through? Why do we look at that story and that person, and we actually devote like 1 hour of our time to listen to that story when the neighbor next door goes through the same story? Then we start to think about what's that all about? Why do we what So basically what we're sold out is how to have, not how to be. Because by buying all these advertisements, by looking at, oh, how so and so is dressed, or oh, they have this nail polish and I've never had this, I have to have it. So that's a very superstitious example. I'm sorry, it's a very elementary example. But the thing is that we are slowly and gradually we're learning how to refer to ourselves by what we have, but we don't value what we are because what we are is not valued. But who doesn't value it? We have to think about that. Who doesn't value it? Where have I learned that what I am, what I have, is not enough? And it doesn't give me sustainability. So what do I do? Is another thing. If I do something that doesn't come from me, my body doesn't feel comfortable with it. Why do I do it? Because somebody has said that this other thing that I'm doing right now is more important and it's going to give me sense of value. So that's progressively what you were explaining, I think, was also in that the trine between a Neptune and Mars and the moon in Scorpio. So imagine, we know about the easy aspects, right? The easy aspects. Well, the easy aspects, just because they're easy, they're not necessarily helpful, and they're not necessarily good for us if we're running them on an unconscious level, because those trines, the trine between Neptune and Pisces with the Mars in, is it a trine? Yeah, it is a trine. With the Mars in Cancer, and then with the trine with the moon in Scorpio, could be because of our idea of what is ideal and how we're not ideal, and putting something on pedestal or something on pedestal, or be disillusioned around certain things, that will create a very strong sense of insecurity. And because of that sense of insecurity, we're going to reach out to earn power from engaging with groups or with places or with people that will potentially have a manipulative interaction with us or relationship with us. But this is how this is fed. And so the idea is that we disengage from that. And there is a reason why there is a square between Mars and this Jupiter. And it's actually applying at this point, and almost understanding that strong sense of what is my truth, or how am I interpreting my world, and how this is determining where my actions are, and how do I need to change that? What do I need to do in order to feel that sustainability that's coming from myself? And in that way, if somebody pulls the rug from my feet, I'm not going to be able to not sustain myself, because I'm not depending on other people. So and the idea is to gather those pieces of us that, based on releasing them easily because of not feeling strong enough, we actually dissociated from them. And so again, that could happen on a very visceral level, in terms of just feeling that something is not right, owning what we are. Where is it that the core of who we are, the heart of who we are? Venus. And how do we share the sharing? Who do we share ourselves with? What do we share ourselves with? I mean, every intimate relationship doesn't need to be with a partner only. I am in an intimate relationship with the place I work with, because I spend 8 hours of my day there. So I'm giving my power there. I'm giving my energy there. So there is an intimacy right there. Who are you sharing your intimacy with? Well, if I'm constantly attending to my kids, or I'm constantly attending to friends without reciprocity, well, then what is that? Why is this happening? Is that an intimacy? Let's review that. Is that an intimacy? What constitutes intimacy? So we know that when we're interested genuinely in somebody or in something or a subject, we want to know more about that person, or we want to know more about that subject. You know, imagine you're interested in evolutionary astrology. Of course, we want to read everything about it. So because we want to know it intimately, And in our engagement process, we share pieces of ourselves, right? Because intimacy comes from sharing those very, very, very intimate pieces of ourselves. We don't share those with anyone. So we can share the pieces on our surface with other people. But when it gets to a point when we are really interested in something or in someone, then we get to a point where we share those core pieces. And this is where the fear comes from. And this is another theme that could be revealed during those eclipses now, is the fear of becoming intimate with the core of who you are. Because the fear, if the more we don't know who we are, the more we don't know what we stand for, or the more we've been led to believe that what we stand for is not important, or we've dissociated from ourselves, from those pieces of ourselves, then of course we're not going to be able to achieve intimacy. And intimacy is something that is very important in a Taurian way, because it sustains actually our life, right? So reviewing where intimacy has turned into manipulation, and why is that? Where is it that we didn't share our essence, but we're sharing some superficial traits that we picked up along the way? And now we're trying from that point to establish some sort of a very deep connection where it's not happening. So that's another point that could be reviewed, because again, we do. There's a doctor that is based in Vancouver, Canada. His name is Gabor Mate, and he talks a lot about trauma, and he's a medical doctor, and it's his statement that there's two basic needs that we have when we're born, and those are the need for authenticity and the need for attachment, which could be translated in love. And so if we think about those two, the love that's provided to a baby is love, pure love. It's supposed to be for what the baby is. So baby, we don't expect from the baby to start talking immediately. We don't expect the baby to be quiet or tell us when it needs to go to the restroom, right? So we love that bundle of joy for what it is. And so this is the part that we need in order to thrive, in order to survive, in order to be sustained in our life. Of course, we need also authenticity, which starts to get restricted very early in life sometimes, or most of the times. And then that actually twists our way of being intimate with somebody, because we can only be intimate with something or with whatever we get into deep relationship with from the essence of what we are. Well, that doesn't mean that we have to wear Pampers all our lives, but I think everyone knows what I mean. So this is also something that could be revealed, or we can get some downloads in terms of how have I arranged my life in terms of how I feel loved. Do I feel loved with my associations? Do I still feel like I feel that love from mutual sharing in the school of thought that I belong to? Or if I don't feel it anymore, maybe I should just go for what's coming from inside and find how I can adjust that because something is coming from inside and I want to attend to it. Because if I attend to it, I will know how to attend to it. I can feel it on a visceral level, what that means for me. And then when I go into a relationship or in deep merging with something, I will be able to hold to that because that's valuable. And I can be in a relationship or open to somebody that is also able to value that. But if I don't value it, then I don't know what the feeling is. So that's where the idea of self-love comes to also. So again, the idea that we can merge with sources of power, but we have to merge with sources of power, not losing that inside. Something like this.
Mhm.
And again, just realizing through whatever happens in our lives around now, or the messages that we get, or all of a sudden, you know how it is when you drive on a highway and there's this big billboard and the message all of a sudden makes you realize certain things that have been waiting in that unconscious state for several years now, but all of a sudden you have this aha moment. So those are the things that we can look out for and actually set an intention depending on where certain things are happening in their life, because there is a reason where something is a little shaky right now, so that it doesn't that it gets clear. So we can start looking for those and realize, because what constitutes a sense of security, and of course there is no place of security bigger and stronger and more visceral than Taurus, right? We have sense of security in terms of emotional security in Cancer. We also have sense of security in terms of our views around the world and philosophies in Sagittarius. And I just realized that the relationship between those three signs is Yad. um, so that's how that what constant. Of course, it's interesting how our beliefs are so easily manipulated. And the moment somebody's playing with our beliefs, or there is something that's happening there, and we accept beliefs that are not ours, that shakes up our sense of security on a material level, and it shakes our sense of security on an emotional level. So this is something that we can also just ponder on.
That's an important piece because Mars is trying the Neptune and in a first quarter square to Jupiter.
Mhm.
Um, it's definitely a good contemplation because that trine, as you were saying, the trine with the moon in Scorpio, Mars, Cancer, and Neptune. I mean, yeah, like you said, with a trine, it's an ease in energy, and that can be something that's easy, that's um, comfortable, and also easy that's uncomfortable, or in other words, something that is to our benefit and something that is, maybe not in highest regard to our benefit, right?
Mhm.
So especially with Moon and Scorpio, so we want to be taking a look at that, but also that could be utilized as an opportunity to dissolve something that isn't actually to our benefit. And
Mhm.
it depends on how we act. It's our instinctual action, Mars. So we
Right.
want to be looking at, well, what am I actually acting on? How is it that I'm instinctually acting on my own personal security? Cancer.
Mhm.
Why did I act in that way? Was that actually coming from a belief that's actually mine? Or was
Exactly.
that coming from a belief that I took on from the collective or from someone else or someone in power, or that I perceived was in power at some time in my life, or an authority that actually that's not my belief. So
Mhm.
this is what's beautiful about the Mars square first quarter Jupiter is going, well, wait, if I acted on behalf of or in a way that actually shows that I don't really act on my own beliefs and I act on other people's beliefs, or I'm actually I've taken on beliefs that just don't resonate, that don't feel good, that don't serve me, then we can change it, which means we're going to have to change our action because
Yes.
the physical world, the earth experience is about what we act on. That's
Mhm.
what shows what we really believe. And so if we're acting on things that are actually out of alignment with what we really desire, if it's out of alignment with our own personal belief systems and our own value of ourselves, then we're going to need to be, pivoting. I love the word pivot for Mars. So we can be looking throughout this eclipse portal through even into the next 6 months from now until the next eclipse season is what am I acting on? This goes to show that there's some beliefs that are in my unconscious that is either serving me or not serving me that I need to
Mhm.
look at so that I can let go of the beliefs that are not mine, that maybe I osmose from the collective, or could be even religious conditioning, by the way. I'm not saying that religion is inherently bad, but we can we can know that there there is always going, because Jupiter and Neptune both rule Pisces, Jupiter rules uh, Sagittarius. We can recognize that sometimes we can take on beliefs in a culture or beliefs in uh, religion or in a collective or body of people, group of people, which could be collective, Pisces, right? That maybe one of the beliefs resonated with us,
Mhm.
but that system doesn't really, all of the beliefs within that system may not resonate for us. So this is
Right.
where we can select, we can be very selective going, well, this piece resonates, but this piece doesn't. So
Mhm.
if
Yes.
I've taken on something in the collective or something in, a religious conditioning or something in a religion, something in a culture that actually does not serve me, I somehow osmosed it in my life. I can see that through my action. I have to look at why would I act in that way when it actually doesn't serve me. Maybe
Mhm.
it's I continue to act and move toward this relationship where I feel like I'm being diminished, or I feel like my power is being taken away, or I feel like I can never really be myself. Whatever it is, that could be an example. Is like, then I must be holding some kind of belief. And this shows that it's a belief that is actually not really mine, because why would I hold a belief that doesn't actually regenerate my own energy?
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't resonate with the natural self. If it
Mhm.
doesn't resonate with the natural self, it's got to go, because we're here to be our own unique, brilliant light. And we have a responsibility to that. So, the thing is I think we've all likely taken on beliefs that don't resonate with us. We've likely all osmosed things through the collective, potentially through religion, because religion has made a very big impact in the Piscean age in the world, right? And also within the culture, we can't help it. If we grew up in America, we're going to have a specific, more American, uh, natural, cultural, uh, is proclivity the word? I want to look that up, but just the instinct, right? We likely would have osmosed things unless we've actually gotten the opportunity to go to different cultures, don't go and check out different things or experiences. We may not really even have a different perspective. So we can see how those things actually have impacted us and recognize that those are choices. At the end of the day, they're choices, and we can make another choice. We can choose to believe something else, something that's more resonant with who we are, something that actually empowers us, something that brings value in our life. And, this can go back to this thing about celebrities. It's like, is knowing about a celebrity really bringing a value to my life? Is time spent following the gossip of celebrities really adding value to my life? Is it regenerating energy for me? Is it a good investment of my time? Is it a good investment of my life force energy? There's an example, you know? So, and it's not to say that, maybe there's specific, I'm just using this as an example. Maybe there's specific celebrities that were like, yeah, I really like watching this particular celebrity because there's something about it that's attractive. What is it? It gives me the opportunity to know myself more, know what I value, know what I like, know what I don't like. That's positive. That brings value. So it's not to say that, following the gossip on a celebrity is always something that's depleting. It's
Right.
just that we have to recognize that. And so this can really be like part of our experience in some way or another during this eclipse season, I think, is looking at, you know, how am I acting on my own behalf, my own personal needs? If I'm
Mhm.
acting in a way that is not really building the reality I desire, then I must be holding a belief that is not mine. And I need to really look at what that is so that I can start eliminating those things from my life. I can actually stop leaking energy in that way so that I can actually create an instinct, because where Mars is where we can have the opportunity to create new instincts or new default settings in the unconscious, where it becomes automatic pilot. We want the automatic pilot to be serving us, not something else that is actually depleting our energy. We want our automatic pilot, our automatic settings to make things more efficient, to actually move in the direction we desire to move, and to create what we desire to create in our life and in the world as well as a contribution of light. So, um, interestingly, the fact that this Mars is a ruler of the eclipse and of the South Node is important, and interesting that it's doing what it's doing with Neptune and Jupiter. And
Mhm.
remember that Mars does rule Aries as well, where Jupiter is. So this is about dissolving any collective stuff that we osmose, anything from the last cycle of our own identity, maybe who we were before, but that we're not anymore. And so Mars square Jupiter, this can be putting the pressure so that we actually really sort through those beliefs and actually work on creating new instincts around who we desire to become and who we are now. And, really becoming our natural self. Also, important point in regards to that is that the set of eclipses, the Aries eclipse, the solar eclipse that we just experienced at 29 Aries on April 20th, ruled by Mars. This one is ruled by Mars as well. And then the eclipses in the in October, I think September, I'd have to pull up those charts. Those eclipses are going to be Venus ruled. So this is really, Venus rules Taurus, Venus rules Libra, Mars rules Aries, Mars rules Scorpio. So this is going to be about, our own personal masculine and feminine consciousness, how we're acting upon our own desires, and how that we want that to be in alignment with our natural self, because I always view Taurus as our natural self. And when we're really in tune with that, we're really in tune and plugged in with our own power and our own contribution of light. So we derive our energy from within,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because we're totally plugged into our natural self. We're
Mhm.
naturally regenerating our own energy, and we're naturally going to be sharing our energy with those that are actually going to be part of our evolutionary momentum, rather than taking us off away from our evolutionary momentum and depleting energy, right?
Mm, mm, yeah, yeah, that's the. It's interesting how we are having those eclipses in Taurus, Scorpio, and then they're starting, and then we have the nodes moving into Aries and Libra, and in the natural zodiac it goes the opposite way. But considering what the society is and has been over the last who knows how many years, thousands of, and what we have entangled ourselves with in terms of, again, our own energy, how we have invested it, where do we feel like we are manipulated to do something that we don't want to do, but we have to do it, or be somebody that we are not necessarily, but we have to be because of that. Because of is so important. Of course, we have to disentangle from those relationships and for those enmeshments in order to become strong within, again, our body, our, that's the interesting part, that we think that actually the body contains memories. We think that memories are in the brain, which is not true. Every piece of our body contains a memory. And that would be one part that some people may experience, certain memories surfacing on, coming to the surface. It's almost like it's something very visceral. And those memories, of course, they contain something very important. And it's going to be around that axis themes. Memory of what I was when I was 15, and where did this person went, because I cannot be like that. And of course there is a sadness and there is a sorrow, and there's but at the same time, that memory comes so that it can be recovered, it can be investigated, it can be integrated, and we can get something out of that memory, considering that Uranus is also the memory that is beyond the surface of consciousness. And of course those memories, and it's interesting how right now, in order to kind of exaggerate that process, it's happening through the body, it's happening through that area of ourselves where we feel identical, we feel that because if we don't know what we own and that's intrinsically ours, we're not going to be able, again, to have sustainability. And the biggest fear, and the fear, and why we're getting into all those kinds of entanglements and all these manipulative relationships, again, it doesn't need to be with a partner, it could be with any area of life, job, money, institutions, ideas, is because of some sort of fear that's been that we bought into, or we had to experience in terms of survival. And pretty much every fear has to do with survival. And that's another piece to the series of eclipses, and particularly this one, considering that we're talking about the middle degree of those two signs, is where what constitutes survival, and how much I can what is survival based on? What is it that constitutes a true sustainability? Well, that, of course, we know that this is also a very, very potent theme out there on a collective level. But what constitutes really sustainability? Is it sustainability to have few institutions that are in charge of providing the basic needs for everyone? Is it the government? Is it so those are certain things that could be we can see played out on a collective level, of course. But sustainability has to do with some natural flow. And that natural flow has to be reestablished, has to be rediscovered. What is natural for me? What's natural for me may not be natural for you or for somebody else. And is that the reason why I shouldn't acknowledge it as natural for me just because somebody says that that's not right? And so this is a big theme too.
Yeah, definitely. I see that playing out through the Mars trying to Neptune, and then Venus is square Neptune. Venus in a first quarter square to Neptune, and how Mars is in a first quarter square to Jupiter. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and maybe something that we all need to watch out for, is how well, I mean, it can play both ways, of course, but as much as we delegate certain power to institutions that are very disattached from nature or from us, and decide to trust them, how much that itself will cause further fragmentation in us. And what I mean by that is, we are supposed to gather the pieces of who we are together. And this Venus has been going through Gemini. And of course, the way we do it usually is we go and we search for information. We look for astrology. We look for all kinds of different, I mean, we go to religion, we go to all kinds of new information, because that's the first way. We need to know. The other part is that we also need to gather. So that's the way we do it. Usually that's how we're inclined to do it. But ultimately, Venus has to do with our own needs. And so we cannot allow ourselves, and that's probably the actual aspect between Pluto and Venus at this point, is we have to keep those pieces together, because the more we delegate the power to some institutions that we're not even able to see, or pull information from places that are not naturally, because of course we know that the Aquarius could go a little into disattachment and all kinds of other ways. So to what extent we're going to be holding to this to this place in us where we are natural, we're who we are, and we don't allow ourselves to be dismembered more. Because ultimately Venus is the ruler of the North Node, and it's the ruler of the Sun in that eclipse. And so gathering the pieces will be the right thing to do, as opposed to losing ourselves in thinking that there is more, that I like this because I've been shown that this is good for me, or it's advertised, so I'm going to go for that, and that's going to contribute to my own value, as opposed to pulling the pieces from within. Because the idea is that we cannot be strong as human beings, as creators of our own life, as creating prosperity, and not even prosperity, but just thriving in our lives, as long as we are applying ourselves somewhere in a relationship with something or somebody, based on the idea that we need that somebody for our own sustainment. Because the moment this is the case, there's always conditions that are imposed on us. And those conditions are taking us away from who we naturally are.
Our authenticity. I mean, because the thing is too, is that I mean, there's just been such an emphasis on getting things from the outside world rather than deriving things from the inside world. So anytime we find ourselves gripping on to something in the outside world, whether it's relationships or anything really, then at the expense of our own authenticity, which can happen really like gradually, right? Then ultimately, how do I even say this? We end up living our life that isn't, it's not even who we are. It's not even real anymore. And yet it's interesting to me because um, I feel like there is a lot of emphasis on staying in relationships, staying in circumstances, staying in situations uh, with the idea of compromising. And then what turns out to be this loss of empowerment or power, loss of power,
Yeah.
and then being codependent and that being a way of life. We could say that there's so many ways. Maybe it's a status that we're codependent upon. Maybe it's a specific being seen in specific quality of clothing or a specific that was flashing through my head and some things you were talking about earlier about, because I was actually looking at um, different purses, and there's purses out there that are like $2,000, right? And I'm just thinking about how, then you see all these people like, you know, this is my purse, like, and it's interesting how there's a lot of insinuation of value based on something in the
Right.
outside world that is an emblem of this means I'm valuable. This means, or because I have a lot of money in the bank, that means I'm valuable because whatever it is. And, or because I have this relationship with this specific person, or because I have a relationship, or because I'm part of this group, or because, there's all of these things that are maybe even unconsciously used because we've been told that that is where we derive our power, is
Yeah.
by having these symbols of power in our lives rather than it being cultivated from within and or being completely derived from within, meaning that we may have these things in our lives for a specific amount of time or a specific process in our own lives, a specific evolutionary momentum in our own lives, or a specific creative endeavor in our lives. But that as soon as we start to make a compromise to who we are, what we value, in our own personal power, in our own personal light, we can begin to actually deplete our self trust and deplete our self-value, self-love, and our strength, or exercise in actually really deriving our power from within, really deriving our own evolutionary momentum from within. Because ultimately, the outer world is only a mirror, and only reflecting back to us our own consciousness and how well we're really getting to know ourselves and really expanding our own ecstatic experience from within. And so when we've like been in this era of it being flipped, where we think that the ecstatic comes from gaining something out there, from something out there, it's not to say, I mean, the outside world is like important in the sense that we need to have those reflections so we can see, like, does this actually regenerate my energy? Does it not regenerate my energy? This is where I'm going? This is not where I'm going. We need those things. But when there is there's so much so much attention on the outside world and the value of the outside world rather than value being derived from the inside world. I think I don't even know how I started going on this, but it was such an inspiration. But just that seems really important, and in my opinion, in regards to this. And I guess ultimately it could be that because the nodes of the moon are coming into this culmination of the Taurus Scorpio axis, which is a yin consciousness, right? So this is that internal work we're doing, because the thing is when the nodes move into the yang form of Venus and Mars with Aries and Libra, I think that there's going to be this natural shedding of things that in the outside world are just not adding up to the work we've done internally. And the work that, hopefully we are doing internally, so that we are really regenerating our personal evolutionary momentum and our own value. Because that personal evolutionary momentum and value is a natural fit to empower the collective and to actually contribute something extremely valuable that can only become from ourselves, from our unique selves. And so I think that this is also important because when Pluto moves into Aquarius for good in that 20-year transit, this is gonna just completely, and I think it's going to really start exposing all of this that I'm talking about, where like there's like where it is we've been actually deriving our power from outside of ourselves that isn't real power, is not true power. It's not real resources on a certain level,
Right, exactly. That's very, very. We know that there is no bad signs and good signs. All the signs have a potentiality to have archetype expressed in a very negative way and also in a very positive way, depending on how we engage in the polarity that is within the sign and also through the opposite sign. So, of course, when a very heavy planet, figuratively speaking, like Pluto, all the others are moving into a different sign, there is a call on an evolutionary, from an evolutionary perspective. Of course, the call when Pluto is moving into Aquarius is not fragmentation, it's not traumatization, it's not overtaking of AI and forgetting what human means, forgetting our own natural connection with the nature, with our hearts, with being able to make mistakes and not be as fast as computers, to maintain the connection with the other person, to maintain the love running that way. That's something that it's not intended to be negative. It's not intended to have some fractions that are running other fractions because the first ones are more knowledgeable or more chosen. No, but it is a potentiality if we don't do the work that we need to do. And it's not about every two people creating a group and then imposing that group on others because they're special in a Uranian way. No, the potentiality, the good potentiality of this movement is for the humanity to learn how to value its own natural self, and how to restore that, as you said, the storytelling, how every one of us has a story. There was a meme on, I don't think it was a Facebook or something, but it was a picture of this person that's sitting on a street corner, and he has an alt typing machine, and it has a little piece of paper that says, I'm gathering stories, or something like this. So everyone can sit down and tell their story. And that's how in olden societies, people used to learn what's good and what's not good. There was no theories. There was no, I mean, again, I'm not saying that we need to go back to caves. I'm just saying that there is good in olden times that we need to be recovered and reintegrated from the perspective of our own experience. And so the natural expression of a person that has something to give, as you said, everyone has something to give if they're living their heroic probability. But we're easily distracted, and then we end up living lives that are not us. I mean, how many of us can say, is that it? Is that my life? So, and we learn early in life, or through the society, or through the movies that we watch, that that's totally normal not to like your life. It is not normal. It is not normal. And we have the capacity to change it. So the idea of this Aquarian passage is to recover what is the essence of us, and to be able to express it and to feel absolutely secure within that, because the moment we start expressing it, we're connected to the currents that are connecting us to the source.
Right.
And so naturally there is a flow, and we are valuing every life out there because we are understanding that that's what the life is based on, the ability to express itself, its uniqueness. And so there's no need for one group to be more than another. So
Or one individual more than another.
yeah. And so that's the connection there, I think, in one way of what you were saying. And so I mean, from that perspective, how can you have this society, or how do you have this humanity, if we still are desensitized from what we are, what is our own value, not based on requirements, or and of course that needs to be recovered through the body. What we are learning right now, and very young generation is learning right now, is how to desensitize from the body, from this amazing mechanism based on nature, through all kinds of electronic devices. I'm not saying cut all electronic devices, but at least be mindful of to what extent our capacity to learn new things, to experience new things, is based on touch, smell, feel, as opposed to looking into screens constantly and not being able to connect to each other, because the only connection that we feel is normal is texting. Texting is not connection. So I'm not saying that this needs to go away, but just to understand to what was the balance in that. And desensitizing from the body is something extremely, extremely bad, because body, our gut, is telling us what's good for us and what's not good for us. That's
It tells us who we are.
exactly.
When we actually touch someone else, That's when we know the boundary of our own body
Exactly.
and the boundary of another, right? So that's very important what you're saying about, you know, not being sure that we're balancing this out and that we're keeping our personal relationship to our own body
Mhm.
uh, intact and uh, in alignment again more and more with our natural self. It's not to say these tools are not important because they are they're assisting us to learn, which
Yeah.
is great, and to tell our story even. Just even
Yes.
that we get to talk here on Zoom and share this information. It is part of our personal stories because
Right.
we love this information, right? And it's being able to express this incredible tool that we've
Right.
learned. So it's really a lovely tool, but
Mhm.
it isn't the totality of our life is to only share this. It's also to, you know, be out in nature or to um, be connected uh, in the physical presence of another person or, you know, or an animal or whatever it is. That is more holistic, to remember to keep all of those things intact and in place because it is a part of our consciousness that is necessary in order to not fragment our consciousness and disconnect from our relationship and from our own navigating system, which is actually through the gut, as you said, and the senses, the body, because that is the conduit of information by which, you know, through all of the senses that we have of moving towards things and moving away from things that are not healthy for us personally. So we can't be healthy if we don't have those connections or that information of what's actually feels good, what doesn't feel good. That's a natural navigation system that we've been given. The more we disconnect from that, the less we're going to be connected to our own navigating system. And I wanted to say too, there's a couple things that were just super powerful for me in listening to you. Well, first of all, I wanted to say I think that what I kind of started going off on a tangent and then uh, lost connection with what I was talking about was the Venus in Gemini is going to move out of Gemini after this eclipse, right? It's going to go into Cancer and then it's going to trine Saturn in Pisces.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what was also why I got into that inspiration of what I was talking about earlier, because, you know, Venus it's so Venus is squaring the Neptune. And I think that that could be because Venus is in Gemini. This could be, you know, like dissolving something, dissolving an option that has been there and maybe choosing something that is in more alignment with what we value could be. Okay. Connecting with something new.
Mhm.
And we could that could go into this belief system that I was talking about, belief systems and like, you know, but also then when we go into when then Venus moves and is trining the Saturn and Pisces. I mean, Saturn's kind of like, well, first of all, you know, Saturn teaches us to to the way I see Saturn, it teaches us about quality. What quality of consciousness do we desire? That means we have to be very, uh, we have to have boundaries.
Mhm.
So we have boundaries with the things that actually are not in alignment with the quality that we desire. You know, and Venus is very much about quality. You know, it's about how does it feel? Does it feel good? Like, does
Mhm.
it feel good to my senses? Like that could be tactile, it could be emotional, it could be uh, you know, what it brings up in the mind. Or with Venus and Cancer, I mean, it's going to be feeling, and feeling safe and things like that. But I just wanted to bring that into consideration, that Venus will then move and then trine that Saturn in Pisces. And I think that there could be something to that is helpful to us, or we could utilize it as something helpful to us, and kind of being like glue in a way, because Saturn feels like kind of like glue in a way to me. Like it makes things more, it can make things more solid, or show where we need more solidness, where we need to like set up some walls to move the energy in new ways. And so, or in the way we desire, or yeah, I guess in this situation, desire, because it's Venus. So I just wanted to say that. And then I also wanted to say that in something you were talking about, I was remembering how I read somewhere that there was this tribe in Africa, and that when there was a member of the tribe that appeared to be mentally unstable, or what we would call mental breakdown, or psychosis, anything that had to do with this mental instability. What they would do, what this tribe would do, is that they would actually basically make that person in the tribe be completely surrounded by the tribe. They would completely embrace that person in that process. They would embrace them. They wouldn't isolate them. They wouldn't send them to a mental institution. They wouldn't actually, they would actually completely embrace them. Because what they said is that they believed that when someone was going through something like that, that they actually had a very valuable piece of information to gift to the tribe.
Mhm.
And so they would wait it out, even if it was years. They would embrace that person. They would completely give them their attention, and that they never, that eventually there would be different processes depending on the person, but it could be years or it could be months. But whatever time it was, eventually, once the message was received by the tribe, the mental instability would go away and the person would come back into alignment. So with what we would call mental stability, right? So the thing is about that is that, and this person that was interviewed in the tribe, they thought that America was like, that it was, you know, not, it was unbelievable that we would actually put people in mental institutions and do things like that, separate from society, because that was the opposite of what they did. And so the reason I bring this up is because I was thinking about how it's like this tribe knew that this person had to get their story out. They had to be allowed to be who they are. It makes me wonder if the mental instability is that there's not, it's like there's this new avenue of information that needs to come out, but it's like a quickening of that information, or if that information's been stifled and not that the story isn't told or expressed, it gets stifled, and then it creates mental instability. So trauma, right? So again, being this Uranus is reintegration. We can reintegrate when we allow the story to come out, because whatever our personal story is not only valuable to us, but it's valuable to the whole society. And this is why it's so important to be our authentic selves, because the society needs us. It needs our story. But not only that, recognizing that we're a part of something so much bigger, and that our story, our authentic story, is actually in service to this bigger collective, or you could say source, God, soul. Some people would call it oversoul, right? So this is why it is important that we derive our power from within, derive our value from within. When we derive our value from within, we don't need validation from other people. And we also know that there may be relationships that have reached completion, and we can honor that relationship, but also let them go. We don't
Yeah.
hold on to things that are no longer resonant or that do not work for us, or even beliefs that are just not resonant or do not work for us. We let those things go, so that we can be really contributing our story, our authentic story, which is extremely valuable, not only to ourselves, but to something so much bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that Jung was the one who said that his practice didn't take off until he realized that he has to listen to the story of the person to figure out, how the whole process. There was no breakthrough in therapy until he realized that the person is the story. So that's what needs to be. And then there is also another one, and it's important that you bring this out, because see, it's coming from the people that were attending to the soul. That's how I refer to psychologists, right? I mean, in the right way of doing that. And astrology is psychology. Astrology is nothing else. We have to understand that we're souls. I mean, not that somebody is doubting it. I think that nobody is. But soul is psyche, and we are looking at the evolution of the psyche when we're looking at this astrology, and that's the reason why we cannot talk about astrology as, oh, you are this because of this, or it doesn't make sense. So every psychological function that the psychologists, through their engagement with clients and over the hundreds of years, have been able to identify. That's the reason why all of those can be found interplay in the chart. And there could be a big no for somebody that's trained specifically in psychology. How is this possible? How can we see a sublimation, or how can we see a projection? How can we see all those different denial in astrology? Well, easily, because that's inherent in the archetypes. And so it's interesting to, maybe this is a little bit probably off the subject, but anyway, it's not, if it's coming, so probably somebody needs to hear it. So there's all these psychologists, for example, that have decided that their life will be devoted to composing a developmental model of what happens to the person from childhood through adolescence or whatever. And of course, we have cycles of becoming between the interplay of different planets. And it's interesting to compare those cycles of becoming. The first 7 years is the Saturn cycle, and the first 2 years of Mars cycle, and all those other ones, and how this corresponds to those classification models that the psychologists have come up with. What is happening with identity at the 7 years? Well, we can look at the interplay of cycles. And so that's the idea, is that through the psychologists, we are getting back also, I mean, we can see it in astrology, I guess, depending on how we're looking at astrology, but it comes to us naturally by understanding the archetypes in depth. But on a psychological side, people that are not looking into the astrology, they're understanding again through deep engagement and self-reflection, that the story is very important, and you cannot treat clients or patients if you don't acknowledge the story of the patient. And that's why you get to treat the patient in a unique way. You cannot, otherwise, I'm going to apply this theory and I'm going to wait for them to have a breakthrough and then I have to do this. This is not how therapy or how any healing works. You have to follow the process of the person. If you are to follow the process of the person, you have to follow their own story. I don't know why I'm saying this. I think it probably has to do with Aquarius and the fact that we're talking about the Taurian part of recognizing that we have value just by the way we are, and how we, through that full moon, we have to disentangle from those other places that are holding us captive, and we feel like we have to be somebody else, or our life depends on it, our resources depend on that, we cannot be real there. We feel depletion of energy, we feel manipulation in all kinds of different ways, and people that work for big companies probably can testify to that, because they have to work more than 40 hours and they're paid a certain amount of money. That's manipulation right there. All these partnerships that we stay in that we're fed up with, but we stay because of money, security, what? That's a manipulation. And it's interesting when we start looking again, talking about this projection and what we can see in the other person, but we're staying in that relationship. It's not good for us. We can complain of manipulation and whatnot, but who is the manipulator actually? Is it the other person, or what's my role? Just checking on that part too.
That's an interesting piece, because I think that ultimately, whenever we're in a situation where we're being manipulated, as long as we're in that situation and we're aware of it, then we're actually manipulating ourselves, right? We're and maybe the other person, it could be seen as the other person as well, because you're keeping this bond going. You are actually there's a post I did one time about this. I wish I could remember it really quickly. It was something about, it just came to me, like recognizing how we can really like hold each other to patterns, which is a manipulation. And yeah, that is an important piece. It's always a reflection, even though we can feel like we were being victimized by someone else. We're never really truly a victim, because again, we've only attracted things in order for us to explore our own consciousness, whatever our themes are. And so when we become aware of certain things, we can then, recognize to disengage from them. And so this is the Mars-Venus relationship as well. It's like, okay, I've attracted something to myself in some way. Now, what do I do from here? Rather than go into the victim of things, recognize that we can then create or derive value from it by actually pivoting or learning in a new way or moving in a new direction, and also getting to know ourselves a little more, in regards to what we value, what we don't value, and then um, recognize where our power really is, and it's not as well, right? Meaning, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But I would say, bottom line, where our power really is. And so, um,
Yeah, what are those patterns that we hold our power for a sense of security, moon in
yeah.
situation? Mm.
And then how that means that, you know, even though we could have found ourselves, just as an example, in a situation or a relationship where we were felt disempowered or, you know, manipulated in some way. Once again, you know, did we enter that relationship with that? Was there something unconscious in our own selves that was manipulating to be in that relationship?
Mm.
Right. So those are always, you know, it's always such a tricky thing. I feel like with Pluto. Pluto is the things we hide from ourselves as well. You know, it's agendas that we don't even realize and motivations that we don't even realize we're acting upon. Um, and as you said, you know, coming from this perception of security, perception of security.
That's interesting. It actually it brings out exactly that unconscious way in which Mars acts, because the perception of security and the feeling of security is the strongest one we could probably recognize within ourselves, and so naturally will produce certain learned way of acting, which we not necessarily know, because everything that happens to us over and over and over again, the reaction to that thing becomes an instinctual action. So we don't it becomes part of our instinctual nature, meaning it's not something that we're conscious about. And so naturally we will act towards certain things that are unconscious within us. That would be the Mars unconscious action. The only way we recognize whether or not something is good or bad for us is by the results of the action. So basically, if we're acting towards somebody, what is the response that we're getting from them? If we're acting towards an institution, what is the response that we're getting from them? If I find myself in a relationships where I cannot express myself, well, how did I get into that relationship? Who got me there? Well, provided we don't live in a society where I was given into marriage by authorities. Still, we're living in this society. Why am I in a relationship where I don't feel happy? Okay, once, twice. Why am I in a relationship where I don't feel happy? Who got me into that relationship? I got myself. Well, obviously, that gives you some clue that there is something that is unconscious within me that I can change. The moment I start recognizing the pattern, this is where we have the potentiality to turn the Martian action, unconscious action, into conscious actions. And it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But that's where it starts, with the recognition of the pattern. In order for us to recognize the pattern, we have to have self-reflection. What is the society teaching us? How to constantly be out there and pursue the next new thing and the new thing and the new thing and the new thing. And if you're not doing something this Saturday and Sunday, oh, you're a boring person. I mean, that's exaggeration, but
I know. Mhm.
yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah. Or if you don't have this lifestyle, then
Yeah, you're less than,
yes,
or you
exactly.
don't have value, as we are talking about.
Yeah. Or just glorifying, you know, again, this is where the pedestal thing comes in, glorifying anything, uh, even glorifying belief systems. I want to say that too, because, you know, I think that certain ideas get glorified over others. And that's always fascinating to me, because you know what becomes popular, and we talked about this before the call as well, like what becomes popular is sometimes fascinating because there isn't a lot of depth and richness in it, right? So,
Right.
you know, there's not a lot of nourishment for the psyche in specific things that become really popular. So why is that glorified in society? What is that, you know? Something to think about,
Mhm.
especially with the fact that Neptune's going through Pisces and Pluto's going to go into Aquarius. I mean, we can be dissolving the things that are actually really not deriving a healthy collective and a healthy mentality,
Right.
and really all things are created with the mind first. So that's where we want to be mindful of what is actually adding real nourishment in our life, real nourishment to our psyche.
Yeah, and even becoming, especially with Saturn going through Pisces, being a little bit more attentive to our beliefs and where do they come from, because as we mentioned, beliefs, Sagittarius, is the yacht point of the security points of Taurus in Cancer. So our beliefs get manipulated, or we just leave some beliefs to come within us and determine our behavior, and that constantly reflects onto how we feel secure on a physical level, in terms of value, and an emotional level. So we're absolutely so easy. It's so easy to manipulate our sense of security through the belief systems.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and going back, by the way, everybody, we didn't plan to talk about celebrities so much, but it seems to be the
Came
thing.
out naturally. Yeah.
But and actually, it probably makes sense because of some of these aspects to Neptune. But how the celebrities can be used as a way to manipulate people's beliefs and sense of security. And when people's beliefs and sense of security is diminished, again, it's just masses are very easily controlled.
Exactly.
You want to, be aware of that, particularly with Pluto moving into Aquarius as well, and Neptune and in Pisces. But what's interesting is, then Neptune's going to move into Aries. That's really a fascinating development.
Yeah, and it's coming up after the nodes go into Aries and Libra.
Yeah. So, and the fact that Saturn will conjunct Neptune means that, there's a cycle that's going to be ending. And what's also interesting, I mean, Saturn will then move into Aries. So great. I think it's good because when Neptune moves into Aries, what I see is that, because there's always the potential of the shadow of the archetype and the light of the archetype. I'll just describe it in the terms. It can debilitate something that's debilitating the archetype within the individual or the collective, or something that's actually regenerating that archetypal consciousness. When you have Neptune moving through Aries, I mean, my thought about that with Pluto in Aquarius is just that, you would want to be aware that that can be a dissolving of the identity, where your identity gets lost somewhere. And when you talk about, AI and like, and just all the technology, where's the identity? Is it
Misunderstanding of what identity is too. Yeah.
what?
The misunderstanding of what identity is.
Exactly. Confusion around identity. Yeah.
So again, I mean, that's another way to look at the energies that are coming up and the energies that are out there. It's a constant call to reclaim yourself, to reclaim what's natural, to reclaim the connection, natural connection to your own self, to your own, again, heroic probability life that you came here to live, the life that was supposed to feel like it's a constant flow of energy, not a depletion of energy. And of course, we know that that happens when we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, what we love to do, and we're with people that we want to be with. And well, actually, I mean, there's a caveat to that, because sometimes we want to be with people for the wrong reasons, but we have to realize that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's always a self-discovery, really, um, the way in which we're actually working with these archetypes in a positive way or regenerating way is when we're really doing the self-reflection of why
Mhm.
we're doing what we're doing, why we believe what we believe, you know,
Yeah.
all of self-reflection is so important. And so that is where it's important to be with the natural self, take time away from the technology, things like that, so that, we're balanced and we're really connecting with our own senses and
Hmm.
not snowballing into um, places we don't want to, that aren't going to be bringing us a mutual energy, right? Or a regeneration of energy.
Right. Yes. 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 So the juxtaposition between to be or to have. I mean, that doesn't mean you're not supposed to have anything. I mean, I'm not promoting any communist ideas or anything like this. No, or socialist, not at all. But considering how many things we surround ourselves with that we don't really know, I mean, we don't really need, but we do it because we've we've been taught, or we've bought the idea that they will contribute to our own value, and then we don't have time to attend to them because there are too many depletion of energy. How many times we get into depths in order to obtain a piece that we're going to put on ourselves, or drive the twice as expensive car that is actually needed, so that when we're on the road we have some good value.
Yeah.
But then we live in a place where we can barely pay a rent again. So what is this telling you? um just think about those things. And um yeah, affiliation to groups, affiliation, how do I express my creativity? Do I express it based on certain rules because I've been told that if I do this then everything's going to happen? Well, there you're naturally straining away from what's coming from within, so you're not going to be anyway. Anyway, that's the way of just starting to think about those things. And again, what is the manipulation? How do we feel manipulated? How do we feel? I mean, everything that has to do with, you know, I mean, ultimately, when we stay in a place where we don't like, or we're in a relationship we don't like, when we're feeling that, there is always a sense of betrayal, Scorpio, um, and it's betrayal towards our own nature. But again, we bought into the idea that we don't have a choice, maybe. Um, and of course, that's an idea. There's a belief
Mhm.
that was overpowering. So again, another team.
Yeah. Another piece that I feel definitely is worthy of at least just mentioning is that Uranus being in Taurus, I do think there's going to be, I mean, we're all aware that crypto is a thing and the financial system is failing. So, this is something to also be aware of, is like really the contemplations around resources and how we manage
Right.
and distribute resources. Um, and, how we actually move value from one place to another, right? And so that's a really big contemplation in the next, I think, um, couple years. I mean, we're aware that more banks are failing. I think there was another bank that recently failed. So, and, you know, we know that the financial system has not been really okay. So when you think about how much debt the collective is in, like how much collective debt we have, right? And just that really when you have a collective debt that is so big to where things are failing or the system itself is failing because there's so much debt, then we know we've been living beyond our means. And why? The question is why. And so, you know, we've already touched on that. And I think it does have to do with, well, if we have debt, in order to be having things that resemble or that are symbols of our value, if that's what it is, I'm not saying it always is, but it's something to consider because it's actually creating a financial system then that is failing because the way in which we are valuing things isn't working. And now, you know, many say that it's been corrupt. And that's not surprising, you know, given Pluto's been going through Capricorn, Pluto's going into Aquarius. And again, because Pluto's going into Aquarius, it's going to be squaring Taurus and Scorpio. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that there's going to be a new financial system. And it's very likely because of the archetypes that we're talking about, it would be digital. And so it's just something else to be considering as well. Although, you know, most of my inclination with astrology is looking at how we can utilize it individually. But it is an interesting time and era right now because what's going on right now with the finances and financial systems and how we move value from one place to another. It definitely seems to me that by the time Uranus goes into Gemini, the way in which we distribute value from one place to another or communicate value from one place to another is going to be completely changed and likely to be digital because Uranus will be in Gemini, Pluto will be in Aquarius. Those are air signs. Technology is a part of that. So that's,
yeah, it's still, sorry.
oh, I just said that's another piece that is really interesting right now. And so anybody that is investing in cryptocurrencies or is considering that or wondering about that, I definitely think that there's a lot going on with that and these eclipses because Mercury is retrograde in Taurus and Uranus being in Taurus and conjunct the sun and as well as the moon opposing. I think that there's
I mean, it's interesting to just to ponder on who has established that particular value system in the societies and how much that value system, the more, I think we touched on it before we started this video, is how why is it that on Earth we have certain countries that have more power over others than, and so who is it that established, even in the United States, if we talk about United States, who we have trusted and gave the power to navigate the financial system? Who is establishing what's valuable and what's not valuable? There's certain issue with European Union too, because the euro was supposed to be the currency in the European Union. There is plenty of countries that don't want to have anything to do with the euro because there's a lot of shenanigans with there. I mean, again, we have a globalization of the countries in Europe under the cap of certain few, and the euro is failing. So it's interesting again to see who has established a certain value system, who has been taking care of the financial system. And then we also have, I think I recently read that Indonesia has decided as of May 1st or May 2023, they're not going to use Visa and MasterCard as a means of, so they're going to have their own. Little Indonesia. Yeah. So again, this moving away from that authoritarian thing, because I mean, we can say that we didn't manage, we have debt, right? Well, who implanted into us the idea that we can live on credit, that credit is okay? There's still companies that are fighting over your credit so they can own your debt. But that's normalized. And so who normalized it? Again, I mean, there's of course we can say, well, it's their fault, but we were the ones who
Exactly.
agreed. So, right, yeah.
It's something we agreed upon and something we
Yes,
wanted.
exactly.
Really working for us. And how do we relate to that? I mean, I
Right.
think that debt can be used positively. I think anything can be used positively, or transmuted into positive.
Mhm.
But again, it is really monitoring our own relationship to it, and then how much is overdoing. And yeah, I mean, all of the questions you're asking in regards to this, exactly, like where it's become normalized and why. And we could also be looking at that for ourselves, like, is this working for us?
Yeah, ultimately, it's again the theme of value. What constitutes value? What constitutes sustainability? Mm, what so this is the printing money value. What is valuable? It's a global issue, it's a collective issue, it's personal issue too.
Yeah.
And then again, we have to be very careful if we're going to leave certain few organizations to determine what's the new financial thing going to be and what's valuable for us.
Mhm.
So that's also something to just ponder about.
Mhm.
Because naturally, if we stay within our own means, we're not going to deplete anything. But then again, who taught us that we can use all these little cards so that we can buy whatever we want to?
Mhm.
And somebody made money out of it.
Lots of money.
Right. So, and now it's our fault. So again, I'm not saying we don't have fault, but the fault is shared fault. I mean, maybe it's not even the right word, but responsibility, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's a shared responsibility. It's not, oh, these people there that they don't know what to do, and we're going to tell them what to do. No, it doesn't work like that. And I think one part of the Aquarian theme is that we have to revisit the idea of certain few that are in power,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that has proven that it's not working, regardless if it's going to be those people or these people ruling us.
Well, I mean, I think with Pluto going back into Capricorn too, I mean, this could definitely be um, some information in this eclipse season, that, and as well as into next eclipse season,
Mm.
that is a restructuring going on. I mean, again, we'd want to be doing this individually, but the more that we can understand. I mean, I can say for myself, I have been learning about the financial system just recently, and it's fascinating because this wasn't taught to me. And I was never taught this in school. I was
Yeah.
never taught it even my parents were accountants.
Mhm.
And this doesn't say that they did anything wrong, but how many of us really know how the financial system works, right?
Mhm.
So um I think that this can be, with all these planets in Taurus, it can be taking more responsibility for learning about the financial system, and how we want to really be actually active or not active in that system, and really um I know for myself, I mean, there's a lot to it, but I've been learning uh quite a lot, and um that's been giving me more information to work with my own relationship to finances and resources, and also the system by which I've been, basically born into, right? So this can be a really great way of also um, looking at how you want to structure. I mean, structure your resources. Let me finish that sentence. How you want to structure your resources and what is valuable to you. And that's definitely been the theme of Taurus Scorpio, is really looking at your own resources and how do you want to restructure them. And so, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring it up because it is a big theme that is going on out there in the world, And I think it's interesting because a lot of people don't even know. A lot of people don't know that that's going on behind the scenes.
That's true. Yeah.
They don't know about crypto. And even if they've heard of crypto, they don't really believe that we're going to go into that kind of a digital dollar or a digital system, digital dollar as an example. Um, and you know, I think that it's definitely very possible, if not inevitable, because of what I'm seeing anyway. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and we don't know. You can't always say. Uh, Let me word it this way: that we have to navigate all the information and really discern for ourselves what is true and what resonates, what seems correct and what doesn't. But it definitely seems like um, there's a lot going on with the crypto. I don't think it's going to go away. And so,
Yeah, again, one of the reasons why we need to have a strong body, strong sensation of our own um, um, vessel, is how to translate information through that body and understand what makes sense and what it doesn't make sense. But the more we're disconnected from those antennas within us, the more we end up doing certain things because of fear and because of certain things that are not for us. It's just that the body can tell us what is good for us and what is not good for us. The same way we know when we're cold that we need to put a sweater on or a sweatshirt on, or when we're hot we need to not put too many clothes. It's the same. It's the same. Just understanding again what is my parameter, and from what space I can act and make decisions for myself. Of course, that could be considered a little bit egotistical, but actually it's not, because when we're congruent with who we are, that's when we can actually share with others and actually be very strong presence for others and be grounded. So it's an interesting time for a lot of exploration, and there's a very many opportunities to just go back within and go back and find ourselves, which ultimately will improve our lives and will improve the circumstances in our lives, because the more we become ourselves, the more strong we become in that truth of and then creating from that place.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, another piece with all that in Taurus is detoxifying the body is a really good idea. Because as we detoxify the body, we're actually fine tuning our antenna of
Right.
communication, right? So if our body is clean, then we can actually receive information more clearly
Mhm.
and naturally attract high quality information. So I just want to put that out there. That's definitely something that I'm thinking about. Uh,
Mhm.
and with Saturn being in Pisces, this I think that could be a good thing to do. Um, because I think of Virgo as, it can be like a detoxification as well, healing, you know,
Mhm.
pulling out the weeds in your garden of consciousness, right?
Right.
Tending to the garden,
Yeah, and then that there's just no need to have something that doesn't
What?
belong there.
Yeah. Yep.
But then you have to be sensitive enough to feel what doesn't belong there.
Yeah. 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 And being that Virgo is digestion too, so that's important.
Mhm.
Hmm. So do you want to take a moment and come back, or are you feeling complete with the chart, or do we want to look at, um, we could also look at the new moon in Taurus that's on May 19th and see that flow from this full moon eclipse to the new moon. Um,
Yeah, we can do that, but we can definitely take a break right now, maybe.
okay, so let's do that.
Mhm.
And so we can come back and then what we'll do is we'll pause this video. And so anybody that's watching the replay will just immediately go to when we come back. So I'm going to pause it.
Did you? Okay.
All right. So one of the last pieces that we wanted to consider is that since we just experienced 2 new moons in Aries in 2023, this actually creates a switch in the lunar cycles. And so from here on out, we'll be experiencing the full moons and then we'll experience the new moon. So normally we experience a new moon in a sign and then we experience the full moon in its opposite sign. But since we've had these 2 new moons in Aries um, during Aries season, this is switching the lunar cycles. So we'll have the full moon than the new moon, which is really interesting because the full moons are going to bring up the reflections in the outer world, as we talked about in the very beginning of this video, how the full moon is always in opposition. So it does bring up reflections in the outer world so that we can actually see something more vividly. And what's interesting about that is having that first and then giving us the opportunity to see those things that can prepare us for the new moons of the signs. And this is going to be happening all the way until July of 2024. And then in July of 2024, we're going to experience 2 full moons in Capricorn, which is really interesting because those full moons actually square where we had the new moons this year in 2023. We had a new moon at 1 degrees of Aries and then a new moon at 29 degrees of Aries. So in July of 2024, it will be about 1 degree or 1 degree of Capricorn and then 1 degree of, 29 degrees of Capricorn. And then that'll switch us back into a different cycle. And I just think that that's interesting, or back to the cycle of the new moon first, then the full moon, right? So it's interesting also because Pluto's finishing up its time in Capricorn, being a cardinal sign also. So I find that to be really interesting, how that's been naturally designed in the way these planetary configurations are happening for us. I think it's significant. And I think it does help us to culminate the cardinal Pluto activating the cardinal signs in our psyche. And so I just wanted to bring that to our attention and go ahead and wrap up the video because I know this has been quite long.
Right.
So thanks to you, Kamelia, for the conversation. It's always rich. And
I can say the same thing. So we actually take pleasure of doing this and those conversations because we want them to be conversations, and they are conversations. They're not prescripted. So there's this natural flow that we want to share that's happening between us, and because this is also an area that we have passion for. We love astrology, and hopefully we are able to express that love through the way we talk about it, which is not, again, it's not in any way unauthentic. It's something that really stems from us, and we're devoted to it. We're working with it on an everyday basis, and not only with people, but on ourselves as well, which is the way we think it should be.
yeah, so this is why our conversations could be quite long.
Yes.
We don't really, I mean, we always have we hop on the call a few minutes before we actually start recording. But other than that, we might have a brief conversation, but we have no idea what's going to unfold in the conversations that we record. So it is, in trust of our own flow. And that's why it can sometimes be quite long. So if you're watching all the way up to this point, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to share this information. If you have any thoughts, insights, questions, you can always put them in the comments of wherever it is you're finding this video. It's always fun to see how the information is landing for people. So if you feel inspired, please know that's always welcome. And we'll see you on the next video.